In this lesson, we're not doing too much we haven't covered somewhere in the previous lessons. We discussed 4/4 time again, but a bit more in depth, explaining time signatures in general. We discussed the values of our notes, from whole notes to quarter notes, so that should all be pretty familiar by now. We described the bar lines on the staff, which we've already been using, but something worth pointing out. We now introduce eighth notes, which get half a beat, or half a quarter note, or we can fit 8 in one measure of 4/4 time. We did a few exercises to show how eighth notes sound against quarter notes, and how to count in 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and when dealing with eighth notes. We then discussed eighth note rests, which, like the eighth note, gets half a beat, and we did an exercise to illustrate this. I personally only like to teach counting in eighth notes if there are actually eighth notes in the bar that they're reading. I feel it can be a bit confusing to count the whole piece in eighth notes at this point. Some instructors might prefer that way, but I think right now we just count the notes as they come. So in our rest exercise, we count the first bar, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then count the second bar, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we're kind of counting the eighth notes and where they fit in the measure, instead of constantly counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now, if they want to play to a metronome that is sped up to act as eighth notes instead of quarter notes, totally acceptable. I just think if they're counting out loud, it's easier to see the notes on the page, count the values for each note in the measure, and perform it that way. So if it was a half note and 4 eighth notes, I would go 1, 2, 3, and 4 and, instead of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Both methods are fine. I just think kids have a bit of an easier time counting the notes as they see them instead of counting everything all at the same interval. If you feel this isn't working for them, by all means have them count in eighth notes for the whole piece. But I feel kids have an easier time grasping little blocks instead of trying to overlay so much on top of that rhythm. We also talked about feeling the notes on the keyboard so we don't have to keep our eyes on our fingers while we play or shift positions. We eventually want the students to be able to shift positions on the keyboard by feeling the notes and using their peripheral vision to find their locations. By using peripheral vision, we tried having the students find the C major home position up and down the keyboard while not looking directly at their hands. This should be something they find easy, but if they're having trouble, have them feel the black keys so that they locate the group of 2 and slide their hand down from there. It's easy because of this big gap, so if they feel the big gap, they can find the 2, easy. Slide their index finger down, put their thumb in the key before. On the left hand, they can find the 2 big gaps, put their ring finger in between the 2 keys, slide them down, and line them up. This isn't something we need to worry too much about or spend too much time on. It's just good practice for them to start moving their eyes away from their hands and finding their location. And once they're in their location, kind of reestablishing and making sure they're in their 5-finger major position. We then discussed muscle memory and how it's developed from practicing slowly and accurately until our fingers and our brains form a connection that requires us to no longer think heavily about what our hands are doing. This will happen faster the slower and more precise they play. So this is a good thing to remind them of if they seem to be trying to go too fast and aren't ready. We want to encourage them to get better by going slower and not to put pressure on them to go quickly. I know kids can be competitive and want to show off if they're doing well, but we want to remind them that slow practice is the fastest way to get good. It won't happen right away, just like learning how to ride a bike doesn't happen right away. But once the brain forms the connection with the fingers, things will get easier and easier. Our 6 practice melodies shouldn't be too difficult as there are no new note values, but they will be playing with both hands together and we want to make sure they're playing accurately. This will be a good lesson on how playing slowly will help them increase speed. So we want to make sure they're practicing slow and making no mistakes at each speed. A lot of times I say 60 beats per minute, but they may want to start slower. I find that with learning a new piece, they may not even want a metronome initially. They can kind of count it to themselves just to get the fingering right, and then add the metronome as they're feeling a little more confident about where their fingering is going to be. 50 beats per minute's totally fine too. I don't think you can play much slower than that and still keep with the beat. It tends to drag a bit, but 50 to 60, anywhere in there is a good starting point. If they can play really well at that speed, then definitely bump them up. As far as the exercises go, there are some eighth notes in each piece. So remind them how counting works for eighth notes and which measures the eighth notes are in so they're prepared. I recommend they do the speed increase one piece at a time. So they should learn the first piece slowly at 50 or 60 beats per minute, get very comfortable, increase the speed by 10 until they're capable with no mistakes as high as 100 beats per minute, but they may not get that high right away. I feel like within a week of practice, they should be able to get to 100 beats per minute on these pieces. Even though they seem a little tricky at first, once they've really been practicing, they should just click. So getting to 100 beats per minute on the first day may not be possible, but encourage them to go home, keep practicing so that the next lesson they'll be ready to reach this goal. If they want to go faster than that, by all means encourage them as long as they're playing cleanly. We then talked about octaves, but not too extensively. I just wanted to be sure they can identify octaves on the piano. Any two notes that are kind of in the same position somewhere on the keyboard, they're related to by the keys around them. They don't really need to worry about octaves in the scale or scale degrees. I just want to make sure that when you say octave, they have a visual recognition of the word. To test how comfortable they are with the concept, you can play a note and have them play the octave above or the octave below, or both, just to make sure that they're understanding the concept. But it shouldn't be too tough. I think most people can tell that, you know, these are the same notes, and we're really just giving it the name, the octave, so that they can identify that these notes are the same, just in a higher or lower position. Our restful melody practice piece is not too tough, but it is one where their hands will be starting and stopping at different times, so it may take them a while to get it clean. Again, we want them to identify when they have eighth notes and how to count them, and make sure they're actually lifting their fingers off the notes when they have rests, so they're not holding the note on a rest. Once they feel comfortable and confident, we should have them increase the tempo in 10 to 15 beat increments until they reach a speed they can no longer play without mistakes. 100 beats per minute, I think, is attainable if they practice at home. I don't think they're going to hit that with this piece in one day. Some of them are going to have trouble getting through this piece even in a couple of days. There's a lot more in the piece going on than they've had to encounter so far. If you find that they're really having trouble, just have them play the right hand in class and just have them play the left hand in class. Just have them play both parts separately. Have them do that on the first day, and then when they go home, have them start practicing it again and combining the hands later. Some of them may be able to get it right away, but it's a little trickier than I think anything else they've really come across so far. So definitely encourage them to take their time, play it slow. If they get frustrated, they can take a break, play something they know, and come back to it later. So, as always, try and be on the lookout for bad posture habits. Make sure hands and wrists are in proper playing position. Try to reinforce keeping their eyes on the page and off their hands while they play. But that's going to be the same kind of every week at this point. I think you probably got a pretty good idea of if anyone needs, help in posture and hand position. But I'd imagine by the fifth lesson here, they're already figuring it out, and they should be pretty good. So good luck, and we'll see you next time.